Story 1. The weather station. I took the job at the Arctic weather station because I needed distance. A failed marriage, mounting debt, and a city that felt like it was suffocating me. The recruitment ad promised isolation, good pay, and 6 months where nobody could reach me. It seemed like exactly what I needed. The station sat on the northern coast of Ellesmere Island, a cluster of prefabricated modules arranged in a cross pattern. My job was straightforward. Record meteorological data every 6 hours, maintain the instruments, and transmit reports to the main facility in Resolute Bay. The previous operator had finished his rotation without incident. He'd left detailed notes, a well-stocked pantry, and a library of paperbacks worn soft from repeated reading. October brought the permanent darkness. The sun dipped below the horizon in late afternoon and didn't return. I adapted quickly, worked by the schedule on my watch, slept when exhaustion took me, kept the generators running and the heat flowing. The station's windows showed nothing but black pressing against the glass, occasionally broken by the green shimmer of aurora. The wind was constant. It scraped across the metal exterior, whistled through gaps I couldn't find, created sounds that almost resembled voices if I let my mind wander. I learned to ignore it, to focus on my routines. Checking instruments, preparing meals, reading until my eyes grew heavy. The first disturbance came during a routine data collection. I was in the instrument shed, a separate module 50 feet from the main station, recording wind speed and barometric pressure. The readings were normal, but when I finished and turned to leave, I noticed footprints in the snow outside the door. Fresh prints, human-sized, leading from the main station to the shed, stopping right outside where I stood. I stepped out and examined them with my flashlight. They were clear, recent. The wind hadn't had time to blur the edges. But I'd walked to the shed 10 minutes earlier, and these prints didn't match my path. Mine ran straight from the door. These approached from the side, meandering, as if someone had been walking in circles around the building. I radioed Resolute Bay during my evening check-in. "You didn't send anyone up here, did you?" Another operator. Static crackled before the response came. "Negative. You're solo until March." "Why?" I described the footprints. There was a long pause. "Probably your own tracks," the dispatcher said. "The darkness plays tricks. You'd be surprised how disoriented people get." But I knew my own footprints. These were different. The next morning, though morning meant nothing in the perpetual night, I found more prints. These circled the entire station, passing each window, stopping at each door. Some pressed close to the glass, as if someone had stood there looking in. I checked every lock, every seal. Everything was secure. The temperature outside was 40 below zero. Nobody could survive out there without gear, and I had the only cold weather equipment in the station. I spent the day reviewing the security footage. The station had 4 exterior cameras, covering each side of the complex. I watched the previous night's recordings at double speed, looking for movement. Nothing, just empty snow and darkness. But the footprints were real. I could see them from the windows, circling the station like a predator's path around prey. That evening, during my data collection, I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps against the instrument shed's exterior wall. Deliberate, measured, unmistakably intentional. I froze with the clipboard in my hands, listening. The wind howled, metal creaked, nothing else. Then another 3 knocks, this time on the opposite wall. "Hello!" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the shed's insulation. The knocking continued, moving around the building. 3 raps, pause, 3 more raps. Circling, always circling. I stood in the center of the shed, turning slowly, tracking the sound. Stopped at the door. I stared at the handle, watching for movement. Seconds passed. The wind screamed outside. My breath fogged in the cold air. The handle turned. I grabbed it and held it steady, throwing my weight against the door. Something pulled from the other side. Not hard, but persistent. A steady pressure, patient and calm. "Who's there?" I shouted. The pulling stopped. I waited, counting my heartbeats, before carefully opening the door. Empty snow stretched in every direction. My flashlight beam cut through darkness and found nothing. But the footprints were there, pressed deep into the snow. Dozens of them now, overlapping, surrounding the shed. And leading away into the darkness, growing fainter with distance, was a single set of tracks.
Bare footprints.
Human feet, naked in 40 below cold, walking away from the station into the empty Arctic night. I stopped going to the instrument shed alone. I waited until daylight, relative daylight, the brief gray luminescence that passed for afternoon, and ran the 50 feet as quickly as possible. I collected data in minutes instead of my usual methodical pace, then hurried back to the main station. The knocking continued every night, sometimes on the shed, sometimes on the main station's walls. Always 3 raps, always moving, always patient. I tried to ignore it, burying my head under pillows, turning up music, anything to drown out the sound. The footprints multiplied. I stopped looking out the windows after I saw them pressed against the glass one morning. Toe marks and heel prints on the exterior pane, as if something had stood on the other side watching me sleep. Resolute Bay told me I was experiencing psychological strain. Isolation psychosis, they called it. Hallucinations brought on by darkness and solitude. They offered to send a replacement to pull me out early. I almost agreed. I had my bag half-packed when the power died. Complete darkness swallowed the station. The generators had failed, both of them simultaneously. I fumbled for my emergency flashlight and made my way to the generator room. Both units were intact, fuel lines connected, everything in order. But they wouldn't start. I tried every procedure, checked every connection. Nothing worked. The temperature began dropping immediately. Without heat, the station would become uninhabitable in hours. I'd freeze to death in my sleep. I radioed for help. Static answered. I tried every frequency, every emergency channel. Dead air. The knocking started again. Not outside this time, inside the station. Moving through the corridors, room to room. 3 raps on each wall, methodical and unhurried. I barricaded myself in the communications room, the smallest module, the one I could defend. I had my flashlight, my emergency beacon, and a flare gun meant for wildlife. The temperature dropped to freezing, then below. My breath came in clouds. Ice formed on the interior walls. The knocking reached my door. I fired the flare gun through the door panel, not caring about damage, desperate to scare away whatever was outside. The magnesium glare lit the corridor for 3 brilliant seconds. Long enough to see what stood there. It looked human. The same height, the same proportions. But the skin was wrong. Too pale, almost translucent, showing dark shapes beneath that might have been organs or something else entirely. It stood motionless in the flare's light, naked and impossibly present, feet bare against the frozen floor. It didn't flee from the light. It watched me with eyes that reflected like an animal's. Then the flare died, and darkness returned. The generators started on their own 2 hours later. Heat flooded back. Communications restored. Resolute Bay's dispatcher demanded an explanation for my silence. I told them equipment failure. I didn't mention what I'd seen. I didn't mention that the footprints were gone by morning, or that the knocking had stopped. I finished my rotation. 6 months became 5, then 4. I maintained the station, collected data, transmitted reports. I stopped going out after dark. I checked the locks obsessively. The thing didn't return. But sometimes, on the clearest nights, I saw prints in the fresh snow, distant, barely visible, circling the station's perimeter. I left in March when the replacement arrived. I didn't tell him what I'd experienced. I don't know what he'd find useful in the warning anyway. I took a job in Phoenix after that. Somewhere warm, somewhere crowded, somewhere the darkness never feels complete. But sometimes, in my apartment, I hear 3 soft knocks against the wall. And I remember those footprints, pressed into Arctic snow, belonging to something that shouldn't exist in temperatures that should kill any living thing. I remember, and I don't answer the door anymore. Not at night. Not ever. Story 2. The toll booth operator. I worked the overnight shift at a toll booth on Interstate 78, about 40 miles west of Allentown, Pennsylvania. The booth sat alone in the westbound lanes. collecting fees from I radioed the main office. I just had something weird happen. A car came through twice. Driver claims it wasn't her the first time. The overnight supervisor sounded annoyed at being disturbed. Could be two similar vehicles. Happens sometimes. Same license plate. Pause. You sure? Positive. Pennsylvania plate, XKJ 4829. Came through at 307 and 340. I'll check the system. Probably a glitch. But I knew what I'd seen. Same car, same woman, same question. Both times. The next night, I paid closer attention. I logged every vehicle that came through. Make, model, plate number, time. I wanted documentation if anything strange happened again. Around 2 a.m., a pickup truck approached. Red Ford, damaged front bumper, Pennsylvania plates. The driver was a middle-aged man in a hunting jacket. $350, I said. He paid without speaking, took his receipt, and drove on. At 4:15 a.m., the same truck came through again. Same damage, same plates, same driver in the same jacket. Is this the last one? He asked. My chest tightened. Did you already come through here? 2 hours ago. He looked confused. What? No, I just got on at the Milton exit. That was 10 miles back. He would have had to pass my booth to reach Milton. Are you sure? I asked. Course I'm sure. He paid and drove away quickly, like I'd made him uncomfortable. I checked my log. Same license plate, same vehicle. 2 entries, 2 hours apart. I radioed the main office. I'm having repeat vehicles again. Different drivers saying they didn't come through before, but I have them logged. Are you feeling all right? The supervisor asked. You're not falling asleep, are you? No. I'm logging everything. Same plates, same vehicles, but the drivers don't remember coming through. Well, keep documenting it. I'll send someone to check your booth tomorrow. But I knew something was wrong. This wasn't fatigue or faulty equipment. Cars were coming through twice, and the drivers had no memory of the first time. The third night, I started paying attention to what happened after vehicles left my booth. The road stretched straight for about a quarter mile before curving west and disappearing into trees. I could see taillights for most of that distance. At 1 a.m., a semi came through. I processed the payment and watched it drive away. The taillights moved down the road, bright red in the darkness. Then, about 200 yards out, they vanished. Not gradually, not around the curve, they just disappeared, as if the truck had ceased to exist. I stood up in the booth, pressing my face against the glass. The road was empty. No lights, no sound of the diesel engine. Just darkness and rain. 2 hours later, the same semi came through. Same company logo, same trailer number, same driver. He looked tired but calm. Is this the last one? He asked. Where did you go? I said. After you left here? Where did you go? He stared at me. What are you talking about? You came through 2 hours ago. I watched you drive away. Where did you go? I didn't come through here 2 hours ago. I've been driving from Harrisburg. I let him through. I was shaking now, cold despite the space heater. Whatever was happening, it was happening on the road beyond my booth. Vehicles were leaving, disappearing, then somehow returning with no memory of what had happened in between. And they all asked the same question. Is this the last one? I called the main office again. I need someone here now. Something's wrong with this road. Vehicles are disappearing and coming back. You're not making sense. Are you drunk? I'm documenting everything. Check the system. Check how many times the same plates come through. The system shows normal traffic. 1 entry per vehicle. Whatever you think you're seeing, it's not in the database. I pulled up my written log. Over 30 vehicles had come through my shift. According to my notes, 11 of them had come through twice. But if the system only showed 1 entry per vehicle, then the duplicates weren't being recorded, or they were being erased. At 5 a.m., a car approached that I recognized immediately. Dark sedan, Pennsylvania plate XKJ 4829. The woman from the first night. She stopped at my window. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with something like terror. Please, she whispered. How many times have I come through? I checked my log. This is your 7th time. Over 3 nights. She closed her eyes. It won't let me through. I keep trying. Keep driving and I end up back here. Please, is this the last one? The last what? The last chance. The last toll. Is this where it ends? Before I could answer, her car lurched forward, engine revving wildly. She accelerated away, faster than before, tires screaming on the wet pavement. I watched her taillights race down the road. They reached the point where vehicles usually disappeared, about 200 yards out. But this time I saw what happened. The air itself seemed to fold. The taillights stretched, distorted, elongated into impossible streaks of red. The car compressed, flattened, but I'd watched someone camp there. I'd seen it with my own eyes. I searched the area thoroughly. No footprints, no tent impressions, no sign of human presence. The ground was soft enough that prints should have been visible, but there was nothing. I stood in that clearing feeling a creeping sense of unreality. Either I'd hallucinated the entire night, or something impossible had happened. The encounters escalated. I started finding the circles everywhere, on trails, near water sources, in places I'd hiked 100 times before. They appeared overnight, dozens of stones arranged with geometric precision. And they disappeared just as quickly if I tried to document them. I'd photograph a site, return the next day with backup, and find empty ground. Other rangers stopped believing my reports. They suggested stress, isolation-induced hallucination, heat exhaustion. I was advised to take some time off, consider whether this job was still suitable for me. But I knew what I was seeing. The circles were real, and whoever was making them was moving through the wilderness with impossible speed and stealth. I set up a trail camera at one of the sites, motion-activated, high-resolution, designed for wildlife monitoring. I concealed it in nearby brush and waited. 2 days later, I retrieved the camera. The SD card had hundreds of images. I sat in my cabin scrolling through them, seeing the usual wildlife. Deer, squirrels, a black bear that passed through at dawn. Then I reached the nighttime images. The first showed an empty clearing, illuminated by the camera's infrared flash. The second, taken 30 seconds later, showed the clearing filled with figures. Not one person, dozens. They stood in concentric circles, motionless, facing inward. Human-shaped but wrong somehow, the proportions slightly off, the posture too rigid. The infrared rendered them as pale shapes against dark trees. The next image showed them moving, rotating in their circles, still perfectly synchronized. Then they were gone. Empty clearing again. Total elapsed time. For minutes. I stared at the images until my eyes burned. I checked the metadata. No signs of tampering, normal file creation times, consistent with the camera's internal clock. Whatever I'd captured, it wasn't human. Or if it was human, there were dozens of them moving through the wilderness in perfect coordination, appearing and disappearing without trace. I copied the files to 3 separate drives and uploaded them to cloud storage. Then I called the main ranger station. I have evidence. Camera images. You need to see this. They sent someone out the next day, a senior ranger and a law enforcement specialist. I showed them the images on my laptop. They looked at the photos in silence. Then the senior ranger closed the laptop. "These are clearly fabricated," he said. "I don't know what software you used, but this isn't real. I'm not lying. The camera was in the field. I retrieved it myself." Then the camera malfunctioned. Overlapping exposures, corrupted data. It happens. There are dozens of images, all consistent. This isn't malfunction. The law enforcement specialist spoke carefully. "Have you been feeling all right? Sleeping well? Any substance use we should know about?" I realized they weren't here to investigate. They were here to evaluate my mental state. I was removed from the assignment 2 days later. Not fired, but reassigned pending a psychological evaluation. They framed it as concern for my well-being, but the message was clear. I was seeing things that weren't there. I took the evaluation. I answered the questions honestly. The psychologist was professional and sympathetic. Isolation can have profound effects, she explained. The mind creates patterns, sees meaning in randomness. It's not uncommon for wilderness workers to experience this after extended solitude. They offered me a desk position. I declined. I couldn't go back to the wilderness knowing what I'd seen, knowing nobody would believe me. I still have those camera images. I've shown them to experts in digital forensics. None found evidence of manipulation. The images are genuine recordings from that night. I don't know what those figures were. I don't know why they gather in those remote places, or what purpose those stone circles serve. I don't know if they're still out there, moving through the wilderness where nobody watches. But I know what I saw, and I know I'm not going back. Sometimes I think about hikers who go missing in the wilderness. The ones who vanish without explanation, who leave behind tents and supplies and no indication of where they went. Search teams find nothing. The cases go cold. I wonder if they encountered the circles. I wonder if they saw what I saw. I wonder if they're still out there, standing in those concentric rings, moving in synchronized patterns through the darkness. I hope not, but I don't know for sure, and that's what keeps me awake at night. Story 4. The night custodian. I worked as a custodian at Lincoln High School in Des Moines, Iowa. The night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 days a week. My job was to clean the building after everyone left. Empty trash, mop floors, sanitize bathrooms, vacuum classrooms. The school had 2,000 students and covered nearly 300,000 square feet. During the day, it was chaos. At night, it was mine alone. I've been doing it for 4 years. The work was meditative once you got into rhythm. Start on the 3rd floor, work down to the 1st, finish in the gymnasium and cafeteria. Same route every night, same tasks, same emptiness. The building was old, built in 1954, with additions from the 70s and 90s creating a maze of corridors and connecting wings. Some sections still had the original tile and oak woodwork. Others were bland modern construction with drop ceilings and fluorescent lights. After 4 years, I knew every room, every corner, every creaking floorboard. I rarely saw anyone else. Occasionally a coach would stay late after practice, or a teacher would work in their classroom until 11 or midnight. Security did rounds twice per night, once at 1 a.m., once at 4. Otherwise, I was alone with my cart and my podcasts. The school felt different at night. Not sinister, just empty in a way that amplified every sound. My footsteps echoed in the corridors. Water pipes clanked. The building settled and groaned as temperatures dropped. I got used to it all. The first unusual incident happened on a Tuesday in September. I was cleaning the 3rd floor science wing around midnight when I heard a locker slam. The metallic bang echoed down the hallway, unmistakable. I stopped mopping and listened. The sound had come from the corridor that housed junior lockers, about 60 feet from where I stood. I walked to the intersection and looked down the hall. Empty. Rows of green lockers, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. No movement. "Hello," I called. Sometimes students hid in the building after hours. Usually they were just looking for a place to hang out or cause minor mischief. No response. I walked down the locker corridor, checking for anyone hiding. All the lockers were closed, most secured with combination locks. No signs of forced entry, no vandalism. I returned to my work. The building made sounds. Lockers probably shifted or settled in ways that created noise. Nothing to worry about. 10 minutes later, another slam. This time from a different location, 1st floor, near the main office. I took the stairs down and checked the area. Again, nothing. Empty corridor, closed lockers, silence. Over the next 2 hours, I heard the slamming 6 more times. Always from different locations. Always when I was far enough away that I couldn't see the source. I radioed security during their 1 a.m. rounds. "You hearing these lockers slamming?" The guard shook his head. "Building's quiet tonight." "Why?" I explained what I'd been hearing. He walked with me for 20 minutes, listening. Nothing happened while he was present. "You're probably hearing the heating system," he said. "Expansion and contraction. Sounds like all kinds of things. After he left, the slamming resumed. Same pattern, different locations, always out of sight. I continued my work, trying to ignore it. Just sounds. Old building. Nothing unusual. Then I found the open locker. I was cleaning the second floor math wing around 3 a.m. when I saw it. Locker 247. Standing open, door swung wide. I'd passed this same locker an hour earlier when I'd emptied the hallway trash. It had been closed then. I approached slowly. The locker was empty. No books, no personal items, just bare metal interior. The combination lock hung open on the handle. I checked the adjacent lockers. All closed and secured. I shut locker 247 and made sure it latched. Then I continued my route. 20 minutes later, I came back through the same hallway. Locker 247 was open again. Girls' bathroom, north wing. Possible intruder. Static answered. I tried again. Dead air. I backed out of the bathroom and tried my cell phone. No signal, which was normal in the interior of the building. I'd have to go to the main entrance to get reception. But as I turned to leave, I heard a stall door open behind me. I spun around. The bathroom was visible from where I stood. I watched as the door marked 6 slowly swung inward. Empty stall. No one inside. Then the door marked 5 opened. Then 4. Then 3, 2, 1. Each door swinging open in sequence. Each stall empty. I ran. I made it to the main stairwell before I stopped, breathing hard, trying to think clearly. Someone was messing with me. Had to be. Hidden somewhere, using strings or remote mechanisms to open doors. A prank. Nothing supernatural. Just an asshole student with too much time. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't explain the note in the locker, or how someone would have known I checked that specific bathroom. I went to the main office and used the landline to call security. I need someone in the building now. Possible intruder, 3rd floor. On my way, the guard responded. 2 minutes. I waited at the office entrance, watching the empty hallways. The building was silent now. No slamming lockers, no opening doors. Just fluorescent lights and my own breathing. The security guard arrived and we went to the 3rd floor together. We checked the bathroom. All the stall doors were open, and the numbers were gone. The white writing had vanished completely, leaving clean doors. You said there was writing? The guard asked. There was. Someone wiped it off. We searched the entire 3rd floor. Every classroom, every closet, every possible hiding place. Found nothing. No intruders, no evidence of anyone else in the building. Maybe you should call it a night, the guard suggested. I'll finish the building check. You look like you need a break. I almost agreed, but I needed to finish my shift. Needed to prove to myself I could handle whatever was happening. After the guard left, I returned to my cart and resumed cleaning. I had 2 hours left. I finished the job. The rest of the shift passed without incident. No slamming lockers, no open doors, no mysterious notes. By the time 6 a.m. arrived, I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted to explainable events. Then I went to punch out. The time clock was in the custodial office, a small room near the loading dock. I walked in and stopped. Every locker in my sight was open. Not just in the hallways, the ones visible through the office window, the ones in adjacent corridors. Dozens of them, all standing open, doors swung wide in perfect unison. And in the center of the office floor was another note. Same handwriting, same awkward pencil letters. We're in the lockers. I quit the next day. Didn't finish my notice. Didn't wait for an exit interview. I told them family emergency and never went back. The school hired a replacement. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he lasted 2 weeks before requesting a transfer to day shift. His replacement made it a month. They've had trouble keeping night custodians ever since. I don't know what was in that building. I don't know if it was students pulling an elaborate prank or something else. I don't know why the lockers opened, or who wrote those notes, or what the 3rd floor bathroom sequence meant. But I know what the last note said: we're in the lockers. Plural. Not, I'm hiding. Not, someone is. We. Multiple entities. In the lockers. And I know that every night, when the school goes dark and empty, those lockers are still there. Rows and rows of them, lining every hallway, each one a small enclosed space. I think about the new custodian, whoever they are now, walking those halls alone, hearing the slams, finding the notes. I hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they quit before they learn what happens if you actually open one of those lockers at night. Because I got out. But I think about that last note sometimes, and I wonder if someone eventually will. And I wonder what they'll find inside. Story 5. The lighthouse keeper. I maintained the Cape Mercy Lighthouse on the Oregon coast. A structure built in 1892 on a rocky promontory that juts into the Pacific. The lighthouse had been automated since the 70s, but the Coast Guard still employed a keeper to maintain the building, monitor equipment, and provide weather reports. The job included housing in the keeper's cottage adjacent to the tower. I took the position after retiring from the Merchant Marine. 30 years at sea had prepared me for isolation and routine. The lighthouse required daily inspections, weekly maintenance, and monthly reports. The rest of the time was mine to read, fish, and watch the ocean. The station sat 2 miles from the nearest town via a narrow access road that became impassable during winter storms. I had a truck, a satellite phone, and enough supplies to weather weeks of isolation if necessary. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away. The tower itself was 70 feet of brick and iron, painted white, with a rotating Fresnel lens that still functioned with its original clockwork mechanism. My grandfather had been a keeper in the days when the job required nightly vigils. Now computers did most of the work, but someone still needed to be present to maintain the building's integrity, to serve as human oversight. I'd been there for 8 months when I first noticed the logbook entries. The station maintained a daily log, a tradition from the pre-automation era that the Coast Guard requested we continue. Each keeper recorded weather conditions, maintenance activities, and any notable events. The logs were kept in leather-bound books, one per year, stored in the cottage's office. I was reviewing previous entries for patterns in winter storm timing when I found the anomalies. They appeared in the logs from 1956, written by a keeper named Thomas Brennan. Most of his entries were mundane: clear weather, light winds, painted railings on gallery. But starting in October of that year, the entries changed. Heard tapping on tower door at 0200 hours. Investigated. No one present. Assume wind-blown debris. 3 days later, tapping resumed. Multiple nights. Always between 0200 and 0400. Door secure. No sign of disturbance. A week later, tapping continues. Now also hear it on cottage windows. Pattern seems deliberate. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. Reporting to district supervisor. The next few entries were normal weather reports. Then, in November, supervisor visited. Heard nothing unusual. Suggested I'm imagining sounds. But it continues every night. Always the same pattern. December brought longer entries. More desperate. Cannot sleep. Tapping every night, multiple locations. Checked every possible source. No wildlife, no luose fixtures. Follows me. When I'm in the tower, it taps on the cottage. When I'm in the cottage, it taps on the tower. Something wants in. The final entry from Brennan was dated December 18th, 1956. It's inside now. I can hear it moving in the tower. Going up to look. If anyone reads this, the entry ended mid-sentence. The next page started a new keeper's logs, dated January 1957, written by someone named Patterson. His first entry noted he was replacing Brennan, who had resigned for personal reasons. I checked the historical records. Thomas Brennan had indeed left the station abruptly in December 1956. No further details were available. I told myself it was just a disturbed man's paranoid delusions. Isolation affects people differently. Brennan had clearly suffered some kind of psychological break. But 2 nights later, I heard the tapping. It started at 2 a.m., pulling me from sleep. 3 deliberate knocks on the cottage's front door. Solid and distinct, impossible to mistake for wind or settling wood. I lay in bed listening. Silence. Then 3 more knocks, same rhythm, same location. I got up and checked the door. Exterior light showed empty flagstones leading to the access road. No vehicles, no people. I opened the door and looked out. The night was clear, moonlit, with moderate wind from the west. Nothing moved except tall grass bending in the breeze. I closed and locked the door, returned to bed. Maybe an animal, maybe debris carried by wind. The tapping resumed at 3 a.m. This time from the bedroom window. 3 knocks on glass. I turned on the light and checked. Nothing outside. At 4 a.m., it moved to the tower door. I could hear it clearly from my bedroom. 3 solid knocks echoing across the courtyard that separated cottage from Lighthouse. I dressed and walked to the tower with a flashlight. The metal door was secure, locked from outside as always. No marks, no signs of impact. I shined my light around the tower's base. I wanted to see if the day-processed water tasted different. I'd collect samples from both shifts and compare. The difference was undeniable. Water from the day shift tasted normal, clean, slightly chlorinated, typical treated water. Water from my shift had that metallic edge, that wrongness underneath. But the chemistry was identical. Same river source, same treatment process, same equipment. There was no logical explanation for the difference. I reviewed the overnight monitoring logs, looking for any anomaly. Flow rates were consistent. Chemical dosing was precise. Equipment operated within normal parameters. Nothing was different at night except the taste. Then I noticed something in the intake monitoring data. The facility's river intake had a flow sensor that measured water volume entering the system. The readings showed minor fluctuations throughout the day, normal variation based on river conditions. But at night, specifically between 2 and 4 a.m., the flow rate would spike briefly. Just for a few minutes, water intake would increase by 15 to 20%, then return to normal. The spikes were small enough to not trigger alarms, but they were consistent. Every night, same time period, same pattern. Something was increasing the intake flow. Either the river was surging, or something in our system was opening valves wider. I checked the river monitoring station upstream. Their flow data showed stable conditions at night. No surges, no unusual variation. The spikes were specific to our intake. Someone or something was manually opening our intake valves at night. I started watching the intake structure during those hours. The building was separate from the main facility, about 50 yards away, containing the screens and valves that controlled river water entering the treatment process. The intake building was supposed to be locked. Only operators had keys. But I'd noticed the door was sometimes unlocked when I'd check it during patrols. I'd assumed I'd forgotten to secure it myself. At 1 a.m. I walked to the intake building. The door was locked, exactly as I'd left it. I positioned myself in shadows nearby, where I could watch the entrance without being seen. Then I waited. 2:15 a.m., I saw movement. The door opened slowly. A figure emerged, human-shaped, moving carefully, closing the door behind itself. It walked toward the river, staying close to the building, moving with obvious familiarity with the location. I turned on my flashlight. "Stop! This is a restricted facility." The figure froze. In the flashlight beam, I could see it was wearing dark clothing, face covered by a hood. Not moving, not responding, just standing there. "Who are you? How did you get in?" No response. The figure remained motionless for maybe 5 seconds. Then it ran. Not toward the exit, toward the river. It sprinted down the bank and dove into the water. I ran after it, reaching the riverbank in time to see it surface briefly, then disappear beneath the dark current. I searched with my flashlight, looking for any sign of the intruder. The river flowed past, cold and fast. Nobody surfaced. After 5 minutes, I returned to the intake building. The door was locked. I opened it with my key and checked inside. The intake valves were partially open, wider than they should be. I adjusted them to correct positions and checked the monitoring logs on the local panel. The unauthorized opening was recorded. Between 2:10 and 2:15 a.m., someone had manually opened the intake valves, increasing flow by 18%. Then I'd interrupted them, and they'd fled. But nobody had come out of the river. I'd watched for 5 minutes. In cold water, fast current at night, nobody could survive that long underwater. I called the sheriff's department and reported an intruder. They sent a deputy, who arrived 30 minutes later. We searched the riverbank with spotlights. Found nothing. No body, no evidence of anyone emerging from the water. Maybe they swam downstream and got out further down, the deputy suggested. River moves fast here. Possible, I guess. But I'd watched the water. Nobody had surfaced within visible range. I changed the locks on the intake building. I installed motion sensors. I started recording video of the intake area at night. I was determined to prevent further tampering. The next night, at 2:13 a.m., the motion sensors triggered. I ran to the intake building. The door was closed and locked, but inside I could hear sounds. Valves being operated, metal against metal, someone working. I unlocked the door and threw it open. The room was empty, but the valves were turning, opening wider, operated by invisible hands. I watched them rotate, hearing the mechanical sounds, seeing them move, but nobody was there doing it. I grabbed the valve handles and forced them closed. The resistance was real. Something was fighting me, trying to keep them open. I pulled harder, using my full strength, and managed to shut them completely. The sounds stopped. The room fell silent. I stood there breathing hard, hands shaking on the valve handles. Then I heard it. A voice coming from the intake pipes themselves. Multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in unison. "We need the water. Please allow the flow." I backed away from the valves. The voices continued, echoing through the pipes. "We need the water. We've always needed the water. Please maintain the schedule." "Who are you?" I asked. "We live in the water. We need more at night. Please allow the flow." The intake pipes connected directly to the river. Whatever was speaking was coming from the water itself. Upstream, in the river, somehow using the pipes to carry sound. "I can't contaminate the drinking water," I said. "Whatever you're putting in, it's affecting the taste. We put nothing in. We only take small amounts. Please allow the flow." "Why? What do you need it for?" "To exist. To continue. We've always taken from this place. Since before your facility. Since before humans. Please allow the flow." I didn't respond. I stood there trying to process what I was hearing. Voices from the river, requesting increased water flow at night, claiming to need it for existence. "Please," the voices said again. "We mean no harm. We only need small amounts. Please maintain the schedule." I reported everything to my supervisor, the intruder, the unauthorized valve operations, the voices. He listened quietly, then suggested I take some time off. Recommended I see the company's occupational health counselor. "You're experiencing stress-related symptoms," he said carefully. "Overnight shifts can be challenging. Nobody's blaming you, but you need rest." "I'm not imagining this. Check the monitoring data. Check the video recording." He did check. The data showed the flow spikes, but the video showed an empty intake building, valves moving on their own, which to him confirmed equipment malfunction, not supernatural intervention. I was placed on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. The facility went to day shift operation only, with operators checking remotely overnight. Within a week, the complaints started. Not about taste now, about smell. The water smelled wrong, rotten, like decay. Multiple residents called in reports. The health department got involved. My supervisor called me. "Whatever you were doing at night, it was preventing something worse. We need you back." I was fighting to keep the valves closed. "There's something in the river that wants more water flow. Can you negotiate with it?" So I returned. I went back to overnight shifts, back to the intake building at 2 a.m. I stood at the valves and spoke to the pipes. "I'll allow increased flow for 30 minutes each night, but only 30 minutes. And you have to stop affecting the water quality." The voices answered immediately, "Acceptable. Thank you. We will control our presence more carefully." That was 4 months ago. Every night I open the intake valves wider for 30 minutes between 2 and 2:30 a.m. The flow increases, more river water enters the system, and whatever is in that water gets what it needs. The taste complaints stopped. The water quality remains perfect by all tests. Whatever arrangement we have, it's working. I don't know what they are. I've tried to research it, local history, indigenous stories, environmental studies. I found no references to anything living in that river. Nothing that would explain voices and intelligence and the need for increased flow. But they've been there longer than the facility. They said so themselves. Since before humans. They've always taken from this place. And now I facilitate that. I open the valves, I allow the flow, I maintain our agreement. In exchange, the drinking water stays clean. My supervisor doesn't ask questions anymore. The health department is satisfied. The residents have clean water. Everything is working. But I think about it every night when I open those valves. I think about what I'm allowing into the treatment system. At the last second I swerved left, using the full width of the interstate to go around her. I looked in my mirror as I passed. She was gone. Empty road behind me. No sign of anyone. I kept driving, hands shaking, trying to process what had happened. 10 miles later, she appeared in my passenger seat. I jerked the wheel, almost losing control. The truck swerved across the lane before I corrected. I looked again. She was really there, sitting beside me, backpack in her lap, looking forward through the windshield.
Jesus Christ.
I shouted. How did you? She turned to look at me. Up close, her face was wrong. The features were human, but the proportions were slightly off. Eyes too far apart, mouth too wide, skin too smooth, like a mask mimicking humanity. Where are you going? She asked. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Get out. Get out of my truck. Where are you going? She repeated, identical inflection. I reached across to push her away. My hand passed through her like she was made of smoke. No resistance, no physical presence. Just empty air shaped like a person. I pulled my hand back. She remained sitting there, apparently solid, apparently real. This isn't happening, I said aloud. This isn't real. Where are you going? Third time, same tone, same words. Pittsburgh, I answered without thinking. I'm going to Pittsburgh. She smiled. The expression was wrong, stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. I'll come with you. Then she was gone. Passenger seat empty, no evidence she'd ever been there. I pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. I sat there breathing hard, checking every mirror, looking around the cab. Empty. I was alone. I considered calling 911, but what would I report? I saw a hitchhiker who appeared in my truck, spoke 3 sentences, then vanished. They'd think I was on drugs. I needed to keep moving, get to Lincoln, get off the interstate, find a truck stop with other people around. I couldn't stay alone on this empty highway. I merged back onto I-80 and continued east. The hitchhiker appeared throughout the night, sometimes on the shoulder, always with her thumb out, sometimes in the road, forcing me to swerve, sometimes in my passenger seat, asking the same question, where are you going? I stopped answering. I stopped looking at her when she appeared. I focused on the road and kept driving. Around 4 a.m. I reached Lincoln and pulled into a large truck stop. Bright lights, multiple vehicles, a diner full of other drivers. Safety in numbers. I parked and went inside. Ordered coffee, sat at the counter, tried to calm down. Other truckers were discussing routes and weather. Normal conversation. Normal people. I used the payphone to call dispatch. I need to drop this load. Transfer it to another driver. I can't continue. What's wrong? Mechanical trouble?
No.
I'm having a medical situation. I need to get off the road. They arranged for another driver to meet me and take the trailer. I stayed in the diner until he arrived at 6 a.m. We did the paperwork and he drove away with my load. I walked to my truck, planning to sleep for a few hours, then deadhead back west empty. As I approached the cab, I saw something on the door. A handprint, small, feminine, pressed into the dust that covered the driver's side. It hadn't been there when I'd parked. I opened the door carefully. The cab was empty, but on the passenger seat was a backpack. Small, worn, exactly like the one the hitchhiker had carried. I didn't touch it. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the truck stop. I drove to the nearest Peterbilt dealership and traded the truck in that afternoon. Took a huge loss on it, but I didn't care. I needed that vehicle out of my life. I retired after that. 20 years on the road, and one night in Nebraska ended it all. I tried to explain it to my wife, to friends, but I couldn't find words that made sense. How do you describe something that shouldn't exist? I've researched the phenomenon since. There are other stories, scattered across trucker forums and paranormal websites. Drivers who've seen hitchhikers that appear in impossible locations, that materialize inside locked vehicles, that ask questions in flat, inhuman voices. Some call it the interstate hitchhiker. Others have different names. Nobody has explanations. I think about that backpack sometimes. I left it in the truck when I traded it in. I wonder if the next owner found it. I wonder if they opened it, if they discovered what was inside. I hope they didn't, because whatever that woman was or is, she's still out there. Still standing on empty highways at night. Still climbing into trucks with drivers who have hundreds of miles left to go. Still asking, "Where are you going?" And if you answer, if you tell her your destination, she'll come with you. She'll ride in your passenger seat, appearing and disappearing, watching you with those wrong eyes, smiling that too wide smile. I don't know what she wants. I don't know where she's trying to go. But I know she's patient, and she's always hitchhiking, and eventually someone will take her all the way to wherever she's headed. I hope I'm nowhere near that destination when she arrives. I stay off interstates now. I stopped driving at night. When I do travel, I keep my doors locked and my eyes forward, and I never, ever pick up hitchhikers. Even the ones who appear in your truck without being invited. Especially those. Story 7. The mining inspector. I worked as a safety inspector for mining operations across Appalachia, primarily coal mines in West Virginia and Kentucky. My job was to conduct regular inspections of active and inactive mines, checking for structural stability, air quality, and compliance with federal safety regulations. Most mines were surface operations, strip mining that removed entire mountainsides. But some were deep mines, tunnels extending thousands of feet underground. Those were the ones that required careful inspection. One structural failure, one overlooked hazard, could kill everyone working below. I'd been doing the job for 15 years. I'd seen plenty of violations, shut down dangerous operations, testified at inquests after accidents. The work was important, necessary, and occasionally depressing. Mining companies cut corners. Workers died. I documented it and tried to prevent the next death. The Blackstone mine was scheduled for closure. The coal seam had played out. The operation wasn't profitable anymore, and the company was going through the legal process of abandonment. My job was to do a final safety inspection, document any environmental hazards, and approve the closure. The mine was in southern West Virginia, about 20 miles from the nearest town. It had operated for 40 years, employed 300 miners at its peak, and extracted millions of tons of coal. Now it sat empty, the last workers laid off 6 months earlier. I arrived on a gray October morning. The site was deserted, no vehicles, no equipment, just abandoned buildings and the main shaft entrance descending into the mountain. Chain link fence surrounded the property, posted with warning signs. I had keys and authorization from the mining company. I parked outside the fence, gathered my equipment, hard hat, lamp, gas detector, clipboard, and entered the site. The main office building was unlocked. I checked inside, finding typical debris of abandonment. Scattered papers, broken furniture, outdated safety posters. Everything worth salvaging had been removed. The shaft entrance was a concrete portal leading to a tunnel 8 feet high and 12 feet wide. Rails for mining carts ran down its center, disappearing into darkness. My gas detector showed normal air quality. I turned on my headlamp and walked inside. The main tunnel ran straight for several hundred feet before branching into multiple side passages. The mine had 3 primary levels, each accessing different sections of the coal seam. My inspection would take most of the day. I needed to check structural integrity throughout the accessible areas. I documented as I went, timber support conditions, evidence of water intrusion, abandoned equipment. The mine was in reasonable shape considering its age. Some sections showed deterioration, but nothing immediately dangerous. I'd been underground for about 2 hours when I found the new tunnel. It wasn't on my maps. The main passage was well documented, every branch and level recorded in the mining company's official diagrams. But this tunnel appeared in a section that should have been solid rock, a narrow opening barely visible behind fallen timbers. I cleared the timbers enough to shine my light inside. The tunnel was small, maybe 4 feet high, requiring hands and knees crawling. It looked hand-dug, irregular walls, no timber supports, just rough-cut stone. I should have marked it and moved on. Unexplored tunnels were dangerous, potentially unstable, not part of my inspection mandate. But I was curious. The tunnel looked complete silence settled over the mine. Even my breathing sounded too loud. Then I heard footsteps. Not boots, these sounded different. Bare feet maybe slapping against stone. Multiple pairs, coming from several directions simultaneously. I ran. I chose a tunnel at random and moved as fast as I could without falling. Behind me the footsteps followed, never quite catching up but never falling behind. Always maintaining the same distance, like they were hurting me. I burst into a larger chamber, some kind of equipment staging area. Mining carts sat on rusted rails. Tools lay scattered across the floor. 3 tunnels led away from the chamber, any of which might be the exit route. I chose the middle tunnel and kept running. My lamp beam bounced wildly, showing fractured glimpses of passage walls. I had no idea where I was going, only that I needed to move. The footsteps stopped. I slowed, breathing hard, listening. Nothing, just my own heartbeat and the distant drip of water. I checked behind me. Empty tunnel, no movement. Whatever I'd heard, it wasn't following anymore. I continued forward more slowly, trying to map my route, looking for anything familiar. The tunnel curved left, then descended at a steep angle. I didn't remember this from my entry route, but I traveled so randomly during the chase that I'd completely lost orientation. The tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was different, natural, not excavated. A limestone cave that the mining operations had intersected. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and a small stream cut across the floor. And on the far side of the chamber were people. At least they looked like people at first glance. 15 or 20 figures, standing motionless in the darkness, just at the edge of my lamp's range. Human-shaped but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't right. I froze. The figures didn't move. We stared at each other across the chamber, me with my lamp, them with darkness. Then one of them stepped forward into better light. It was naked, skin pale and streaked with mine dust. It moved oddly, joints bending at wrong angles, gait irregular. As it got closer, I could see its face. Almost human. The features were present but arranged incorrectly. Eyes too high, mouth too low, nose absent. Like something had built a person from memory, getting most details right but missing crucial elements. It raised one hand toward me. The hand had 6 fingers. I backed away slowly. The figure followed, maintaining distance. Behind it, the other figures began moving forward as well. All of them walking with that same irregular gait. All of them watching me with faces that weren't quite right. I turned and ran back the way I'd come. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching impossibly far. Behind me, I could hear them following, dozens of footsteps, getting closer. The tunnel forked. I went left. Another fork, I went right. The mine had become a maze, passages multiplying, directions meaningless. I burst into a chamber I recognized, the one with the carved walls and the pile of personal items. I'd somehow circled back to the hidden chamber. But now there were more items in the pile. Recent additions. And sitting on top was my clipboard. The one I'd been carrying. The one that should have been in my hand. I looked down. My hands were empty. I dropped the clipboard somewhere during the chase. But how had it gotten here? The footsteps entered the chamber behind me. I spun around. They filled the entrance. Dozens of those almost human figures, crowding the tunnel mouth, watching me with their wrong faces. None of them entered the chamber. They just stood there, waiting. One of them spoke. The voice was like rocks grinding together, forming approximate words. "Stay." I shook my head.
No.
"I'm leaving." "Stay," it repeated. The others echoed the word, overlapping. "Stay, stay, stay." I looked around the chamber desperately. There was no other exit. The tunnel behind those figures was the only way out, and they filled it completely, a wall of pale bodies blocking my escape. I picked up the nearest object, a mining pick left in the corner. Then I charged the tunnel entrance, swinging wildly. The pick passed through them like they were smoke. No resistance, no impact. They didn't move or react, just stood there watching as I swung through their insubstantial bodies. I kept running, pushing through the crowd. They offered no physical resistance. I could walk straight through them, but the sensation was horrible, like pushing through cold water that had never been liquid. Each body I passed through left me colder, more exhausted. I emerged on the other side and kept running. The figures didn't follow this time. They stayed in the chamber, calling after me in that grinding voice. "Stay, stay, stay." I found the exit by accident. I'd been wandering for what felt like hours, choosing turns randomly, when I saw daylight ahead. Real light, not lamp glow. I ran toward it and emerged from the mine entrance into late afternoon. I kept running until I reached my truck. I threw my equipment in the back, started the engine, and drove away from that mine as fast as the rough road allowed. I didn't file my inspection report. I called the mining company and told them I couldn't complete the evaluation, family emergency. Someone else would need to handle it. They were annoyed but accepted it. The mine was officially closed 2 months later. I heard they sealed the entrance with concrete, standard procedure for abandoned operations. I hope it's enough. I never told anyone what I found down there. Those figures, that chamber, the collection of personal items. I don't know what they were, ghosts, creatures, something else. I don't know if they were the miners who'd gone missing over the years, or something that had taken their forms. But I know they're still down there, in the darkness beneath the mountain, waiting in those tunnels. And I know they wanted me to stay. I retired 6 months later. I couldn't go into mines anymore. Every tunnel looked the same. Every shadow might hide those pale figures. I took a job with OSHA doing surface inspections only. Nothing underground, nothing dark. I still have nightmares about that chamber, about the pile of personal items, growing larger, accumulating for decades. I wonder whose belongings are newest. I wonder if they're adding to it still. And I think about that word they kept repeating. Stay. Not help us. Not join us. Just stay. Like they'd been there so long they'd forgotten there was anywhere else to be. Like they wanted company in the darkness. Like they were lonely. I hope they stay lonely. I hope no one else goes into that mine. Because I don't think anyone who stays comes back out. At least not as themselves. Story 8. The research assistant. I worked as a research assistant at the Keller Observatory in northern Arizona, a small facility operated by a private astronomy foundation. The observatory sat at 8,000 feet elevation, accessed by a winding dirt road that became impassable in winter. My job was to maintain the equipment, collect data, and support the visiting researchers who came to use our telescope. The position was mostly solitary. During peak research season, we'd have visiting astronomers every few weeks, but the rest of the time I was alone in the facility, just me, the telescope, and the mountain. The observatory consisted of 3 buildings. The main dome housing a 16-inch reflecting telescope, a control room with computers and monitoring equipment, and a small residence where I lived. Solar panels and a backup generator provided power. Satellite internet gave me limited connectivity to the outside world. I'd taken the job after finishing my astronomy degree, seeing it as valuable experience before applying to graduate programs. The isolation didn't concern me. I'd always been comfortable alone, and the night sky from that elevation was spectacular. The work was straightforward. Open the dome at dusk, run scheduled observations, close the dome at dawn, maintain equipment during the day. Most observations were automated. The computer would point the telescope, collect images, and store data. I was there primarily as human oversight, handling problems that arose. I'd been at the observatory for 6 months when the anomaly appeared. I noticed it during a routine data review. The telescope had been imaging a section of sky in the constellation Cygnus, collecting long-exposure photographs for a researcher studying star formation. The images looked normal at first, familiar stellar patterns, expected background galaxies. But one frame showed something different, a point of light that shouldn't exist, appearing in the corner of the frame. Not a star, the position was wrong, and it didn't appear in reference catalogs. Not a satellite or aircraft, it was too faint, and the exposure was too long for any moving object to register as a point. I checked the previous and subsequent frames. The light appeared in only one image, captured at 2:47 a.m. 3 days earlier. Before and after, that section of sky was empty. I noted it in my log as every few nights there it would be, a point of light in a single frame, gone the next exposure. I began staying up all night, watching in real time as the telescope collected data. I wanted to see it appear live, to catch it in the moment. It finally happened 3 weeks later. I was monitoring the control room displays at 3 a.m. when the latest frame appeared on screen. And there it was, the anomalous light, appearing in the lower right quadrant. I immediately slewed the telescope to center on that position and took a series of rapid exposures. The object appeared in all of them. It was staying visible, not disappearing immediately like previous times. I zoomed in, increasing magnification. The point source resolved into a shape. Not a star, not a planet, something irregular, geometric. I adjusted the focus and took the highest resolution image I could. The object was artificial. I was certain of it. Angular structures, regular patterns, too organized to be natural. Some kind of craft or construct, tumbling slowly, reflecting sunlight. I watched for 20 minutes as it remained visible. Then, between one frame and the next, it vanished. Not fading gradually, just gone, as if it had never been there. I called Dr. Chun immediately, not caring that it was 3 a.m. her time. It's artificial. I got clear images. It's not a natural object. Send them, now. I transmitted the files. She called back 30 minutes later, her voice careful and controlled. I'm looking at your images. Are you absolutely certain these are unmanipulated? Yes, straight from the telescope. I watched it live. Then we have a problem, because what you photographed shouldn't exist. What do you mean? The object size. Based on its distance and apparent brightness, we can calculate its dimensions. It's enormous, at least 2 kilometers across. And its trajectory is definitely headed here. It's going to pass very close to Earth. How close? Within cislunar space, inside the moon's orbit. I felt cold despite the heater running. When? If it maintains its current trajectory and velocity? 6 weeks. Dr. Chun contacted NASA, JPL, and several other observatories. Nobody had detected the object through conventional means. It only appeared in our images and only intermittently. But based on our data, other facilities began dedicated observations. Within a week, 3 other observatories confirmed they'd captured similar intermittent appearances. The object was real, it was approaching, and nobody could explain what it was or why it kept disappearing. Theories ranged from experimental spacecraft to an alien probe to exotic matter that phased in and out of normal space. The data didn't support any single explanation conclusively. As it got closer, the appearances became more frequent. Instead of single frames showing it, we'd get sequences 5 or 10 frames before it vanished. I captured hundreds of images over the following weeks, watching it grow larger, seeing more detail. The structure was massive and complex. Angular sections connected in ways that hurt to look at too directly, geometries that seemed impossible, like an Escher drawing rendered in 3 dimensions. Parts of it looked crystalline, reflecting starlight in strange patterns. Other sections were dark, absorbing light completely, and it was definitely coming to Earth. For weeks before projected closest approach, the object stopped disappearing. It remained visible continuously, growing larger each night. Mainstream media picked up the story. Governments issued statements. Panic began spreading. I continued my observations, documenting everything. The object was now close enough that I could see it with my naked eye. A bright point moving against the stellar background, noticeably shifting position hour by hour. Dr. Chun called me 3 days before closest approach. I need you to evacuate. Get to town. Get somewhere with people around. We don't know what's going to happen. I want to stay. I want to observe it. That's not wise. If something goes wrong, it won't matter where I am. I'm staying. She didn't argue further. I think she understood. The night of closest approach was cloudless and still. The object was visible to unaided eyes now. Not just a point anymore, but a structure, angular and vast, reflecting sunlight. It would pass within 50,000 miles of Earth, closer than most satellites. I opened the dome at sunset and positioned the telescope. But I spent most of the night outside watching with my own eyes. The telescope could capture details, but I wanted the direct experience. The object moved slowly across the sky, crossing from west to east over the course of hours. At its closest, around midnight, I could see structure clearly. Impossible geometries, surfaces that seemed to shift and reconfigure, portions that remained completely black despite reflecting light everywhere else. It made no sound, no communication. It simply passed, vast and silent and incomprehensible. Around 2 a.m., something changed. The object began unfolding. Sections that had appeared solid separated and extended outward. The whole structure expanded, doubling its apparent size in minutes. I watched through the telescope as portions of it detached completely and began moving independently. Smaller objects, each one still hundreds of meters across, separated from the main structure and started their own trajectories. Some moved toward Earth. Others went elsewhere, toward the Moon, toward Mars, out toward the outer solar system. The main structure continued past Earth, not slowing, heading deeper into space. But the fragments that came toward us descended into the atmosphere. I watched through the telescope as they fell, glowing orange with re-entry heat, slowing as they dropped. They were landing. All over the world, these fragments were landing. One came down about 40 miles from the observatory. I saw it descend beyond the eastern ridge, saw the sky light up briefly as it touched ground. No explosion, just a gentle light that faded quickly. Then silence. The main object continued its trajectory, growing smaller as it receded. Within an hour, it had passed beyond close range, continuing away from the sun, heading back into deep space. I stayed outside until dawn, watching the sky, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Just normal night transitioning to normal day. That was 6 months ago. The fragments that landed remain where they fell. Governments tried to secure them, study them, understand them. Every attempt has failed. They're inert, not responding to any analysis, not doing anything, just sitting there. Perfect geometric structures of some unknown material distributed across the planet. Nobody knows why they're here. No communication has come from them. The main object continued out of the solar system and hasn't been seen since. I'm still at the observatory, still collecting data, still watching the sky. Dr. Chun asked if I wanted to join the fragment research teams. I declined. I prefer being here, watching, waiting to see if the object returns. Because I think it will. I've been reviewing the data from before its appearance, going back through years of archived observations. And I found earlier instances, faint, barely visible, easily mistaken for artifacts. This wasn't the first time. That object or others like it have been passing through our system for years, maybe decades, appearing and disappearing, watching us, leaving pieces behind. I don't know what they want. I don't know what those fragments are meant to do, but I know they're not inert. Something that complex, something that traveled across interstellar space and carefully placed artifacts on our planet. That's not inert. It's waiting. So I watch the sky, every night, all night, recording everything. Because when it comes back, and I'm certain it will, I want to see it. I want to document what happens next. The night sky isn't empty. I know that now. It's full of things we can't see. Things that only appear in single frames. Things that move between the stars. and one of them has taken an interest in Earth. I hope we're ready for what comes next. I don't think we are. Story 9. The rural mail carrier. I delivered mail on Route 47, a rural route covering about 70 miles of backcountry in northern Minnesota. The route served 48 addresses, farms, hunting cabins, isolated homes connected by dirt roads and logging trails. Some mailboxes were 5 miles from the next nearest neighbor. I drive the route 5 days a week in a right-hand drive postal vehicle, starting at 8 a.m. from the Greenfield post office. Most days I'd finish by 3 p.m., though winter weather sometimes extended that to 5 or 6 hours. The job was steady, quiet, and allowed me time to think while I drove. I'd been running the route for 8 years. I knew every mailbox, every resident, every turn. Most people I'd see maybe once a month. They'd hear my vehicle and come out to collect packages or chat briefly. Otherwise, I'd just deliver to their boxes. I started arriving at different times, trying to catch whoever was leaving the letters. Sometimes I'd check the box on Monday, sometimes Friday. Sometimes early morning, sometimes afternoon. Didn't matter. There was always a letter, always waiting as if they knew exactly when I'd arrive. After 6 weeks of mysterious letters, I decided to investigate the property directly. On a Saturday, my day off, I drove to the abandoned farmstead and walked down the driveway. The burned foundation was exactly as it appeared from the road. Collapsed stone walls, charred timbers, decades of weather deterioration. The fire had happened 20 years earlier, according to county records. Nobody had rebuilt. The outbuildings were still standing, a barn with a sagging roof and a small equipment shed. Both were empty except for rusted farm tools and debris. No signs of recent occupation. I walked the entire property. 5 acres of overgrown fields, forest encroaching from all sides. The well was capped, the septic system collapsed. Nothing indicated anyone was living here or even visiting regularly. But as I was leaving, I noticed footprints in the mud near the mailbox. Fresh prints made within the last day or two. Bare feet, human-sized, leading from the road down the driveway. I followed them. They continued for about 100 yards before disappearing into grass. Just ending as if whoever made them had simply stopped existing at that point. I returned to my vehicle deeply unsettled. The letters, the footprints, the insistence on schedule and service. Something was happening here that I didn't understand. The following Monday, I found another letter. This one was different. We would like to meet. Please visit on Saturday at noon. Come to the foundation. I stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct said not to go, not to engage with whatever was leaving these letters. But I was tired of the mystery. I wanted answers. I called the postmaster. I'm getting direct requests now. Someone wants to meet. Don't go. This has gotten too weird. We should contact law enforcement. And tell them what? That someone's leaving letters in a mailbox. That's not illegal. Still, don't go alone. But I went alone. I couldn't explain why. Maybe curiosity, maybe stubbornness. I needed to know what was happening. Saturday at noon, I drove to the property and walked down the driveway. The day was cold, overcast, threatening snow. My footsteps crunched on frozen ground as I approached the burned foundation. Nobody was visible. I stood at the edge of the collapsed structure, looking at charred stones and rusted metal. Hello? I'm here for the meeting. No response. Just wind through bare trees and the distant call of a crow. I waited 15 minutes. Nothing happened. I was about to leave when I noticed something at the foundation's center. A gap in the rubble, revealing darkness below. A basement or cellar partially intact beneath the burned house. I approached carefully and looked down. Stone steps descended into darkness. My flashlight showed a small space below, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with stone walls and a dirt floor. And sitting in the center of that space, arranged in a neat circle, were envelopes. Dozens of them, all identical to the ones I'd been receiving. Unopened, addressed to occupant, arranged in a perfect ring. I descended the steps. The basement was cold, smelling of earth and old smoke. I picked up one of the envelopes and opened it. Blank paper, nothing written inside, I checked another, also blank. I checked 5 more, all blank sheets of paper in sealed envelopes. But the letters I'd been receiving had messages. These were different, or were they? Had the messages only appeared when I opened them at the mailbox? I heard movement above me, footsteps crossing the foundation rubble. I turned toward the stairs. Figures appeared at the top, silhouetted against gray sky. Human-shaped, standing motionless, looking down at me. I couldn't see faces, they were just dark shapes against the light. "Who are you?" I called up. "What do you want?" One of them descended the stairs. As it came closer, I could see details. It looked human at first, right proportions, right movements, but something was wrong with the skin. Too smooth, too uniform, like a mannequin. It reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped about 6 feet from me. Then it spoke, voice flat and artificial. "Thank you for maintaining the schedule. It allows us to verify." Verify what? Your consistency, your reliability, your humanity. I backed against the far wall. "I don't understand. We need to know humans still follow routines, still honor commitments, still deliver messages reliably. You provide that confirmation. Who are you?" "We were here before. We will be here after. We wait and verify." More figures descended the stairs. 6 of them now, all with that same too smooth skin, all moving with slight irregularity. They spread around the basement, not threatening but present, surrounding me. "We appreciate your service," one of them said. "Thank you for your punctuality," said another. "Please maintain the schedule," said a third. They spoke in overlapping echoes, the same phrases from the letters, repeated by multiple voices. I looked for an escape. The stairs were blocked by figures. The walls were solid stone. I was trapped in a basement with things that weren't quite human, thanking me for delivering mail. "I want to leave," I said. "Of course," the first figure replied. "You have completed the meeting. You may return to your route." They stepped aside, clearing the stairs. I climbed quickly, not looking back, emerging into daylight. I ran to my vehicle and drove away, hands shaking on the wheel. I called in sick the following week. The postmaster covered my route. She called me afterward, confused. "That abandoned property you mentioned? There's no mailbox there. Just empty roadside." "What?" "Yes, there is. I check it every week." I drove past 3 times looking for it. Nothing. Just forest and old driveway. I went back myself. She was right. The mailbox was gone. Not removed, not knocked down. Just absent, as if it had never existed. The driveway was still there, overgrown and barely visible. But no mailbox marked the entrance. I never received another letter. The property appeared on my route list, but when I checked the address in the system, it showed as disconnected, property abandoned. I finished out my career on Route 47, retiring last month after 30 years with the Postal Service. I ran that route for 9 years total, passing the abandoned farmstead hundreds of times. I never saw the mailbox again. I never received another letter. But sometimes, driving past that overgrown driveway, I'd see footprints in the snow or mud, bare feet, leading from the road into the woods. Always fresh, always the same. I don't know what those things were. I don't know why they cared about mail delivery, why they needed to verify human consistency and reliability. I don't know if they're still there, waiting at that burned foundation. But I know they were testing something, checking whether humans still followed patterns, still honored obligations, whether we were still predictable. And I think I passed their test. I hope that's a good thing, but I'm not certain, because whatever they were verifying, whatever they were waiting for, I don't think it's finished. I think they're still out there, still waiting, still checking mailboxes in abandoned places, seeing if anyone maintains the schedule. And I wonder what happens if we stop. If humans become too unpredictable, too unreliable. What happens then? I don't know, but I'm glad I retired. I'm glad it's someone else's route now. I hope the next carrier doesn't find that mailbox. I hope it stays gone. But if they do find it, If a new letter appears with that precise handwriting and those familiar phrases, I hope they're smarter than me. I hope they don't go to the meeting. Story 10. The water treatment operator. I operated the Riverside Water Treatment Facility, a small plant serving 3 rural townships in eastern Oregon. The facility processed river water through filtration and treatment, providing clean drinking water to about 2,000 residents. My job was to monitor the treatment process, maintain equipment, and ensure water quality met all safety standards. The plant was automated for most operations, but regulations required a certified operator on-site during processing hours. I worked the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. During the day, the plant ran on minimal processing with remote monitoring. The facility sat on the riverbank about 4 miles from the nearest town. One main building housed the control room, chemical storage, and equipment. Outside were the intake structures, settling basins, and filtration systems. The whole operation was... I wanted to see if the day-processed water tasted different. I'd collect samples from both shifts and compare. The difference was undeniable. Water from the day shift tasted normal, clean, slightly chlorinated, typical treated water. Water from my shift had that metallic edge, that wrongness underneath. But the chemistry was identical. Same river source, same treatment process, same equipment. There was no logical explanation for the difference. I reviewed the overnight monitoring logs, looking for any anomaly. Flow rates were consistent. Chemical dosing was precise. Equipment operated within normal parameters. Nothing was different at night except the taste. Then I noticed something in the intake monitoring data. The facility's river intake had a flow sensor that measured water volume entering the system. The readings showed minor fluctuations throughout the day, normal variation based on river conditions. But at night, specifically between 2 and 4 a.m., the flow rate would spike briefly. Just for a few minutes, water intake would increase by 15 to 20%, then return to normal. The spikes were small enough to not trigger alarms, but they were consistent. Every night, same time period, same pattern. Something was increasing the intake flow. Either the river was surging, or something in our system was opening valves wider. I checked the river monitoring station upstream. Their flow data showed stable conditions at night. No surges, no unusual variation. The spikes were specific to our intake. Someone or something was manually opening our intake valves at night. I started watching the intake structure during those hours. The building was separate from the main facility, about 50 yards away, containing the screens and valves that controlled river water entering the treatment process. The intake building was supposed to be locked. Only operators had keys. But I'd noticed the door was sometimes unlocked when I'd check it during patrols. I'd assumed I'd forgotten to secure it myself. At 1 a.m. I walked to the intake building. The door was locked, exactly as I'd left it. I positioned myself in shadows nearby, where I could watch the entrance without being seen. Then I waited. 2:15 a.m., I saw movement. The door opened slowly. A figure emerged, human-shaped, moving carefully, closing the door behind itself. It walked toward the river, staying close to the building, moving with obvious familiarity with the location. I turned on my flashlight. "Stop! This is a restricted facility." The figure froze. In the flashlight beam, I could see it was wearing dark clothing, face covered by a hood. Not moving, not responding, just standing there. "Who are you? How did you get in?" No response. The figure remained motionless for maybe 5 seconds. Then it ran. Not toward the exit, toward the river. It sprinted down the bank and dove into the water. I ran after it, reaching the riverbank in time to see it surface briefly, then disappear beneath the dark current. I searched with my flashlight, looking for any sign of the intruder. The river flowed past, cold and fast. Nobody surfaced. After 5 minutes, I returned to the intake building. The door was locked. I opened it with my key and checked inside. The intake valves were partially open, wider than they should be. I adjusted them to correct positions and checked the monitoring logs on the local panel. The unauthorized opening was recorded. Between 2:10 and 2:15 a.m., someone had manually opened the intake valves. increasing flow by 18%. Then I'd interrupted them, and they'd fled. But nobody had come out of the river. I'd watched for 5 minutes. In cold water, fast current at night, nobody could survive that long underwater. I called the sheriff's department and reported an intruder. They sent a deputy, who arrived 30 minutes later. We searched the riverbank with spotlights. Found nothing. No body, no evidence of anyone emerging from the water. Maybe they swam downstream and got out further down, the deputy suggested. River moves fast here. Possible, I guess. But I'd watched the water. Nobody had surfaced within visible range. I changed the locks on the intake building. I installed motion sensors. I started recording video of the intake area at night. I was determined to prevent further tampering. The next night, at 2:13 a.m., the motion sensors triggered. I ran to the intake building. The door was closed and locked. But inside I could hear sounds. Valves being operated, metal against metal, someone working. I unlocked the door and threw it open. The room was empty, but the valves were turning, opening wider, operated by invisible hands. I watched them rotate, hearing the mechanical sounds, seeing them move, but nobody was there doing it. I grabbed the valve handles and forced them closed. The resistance was real. Something was fighting me, trying to keep them open. I pulled harder, using my full strength, and managed to shut them completely. The sounds stopped. The room fell silent. I stood there breathing hard, hands shaking on the valve handles. Then I heard it. A voice coming from the intake pipes themselves. Multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in unison. We need the water. Please allow the flow. I backed away from the valves. The voices continued, echoing through the pipes. We need the water. We've always needed the water. Please maintain the schedule. Who are you? I asked. We live in the water. We need more at night. Please allow the flow. The intake pipes connected directly to the river. Whatever was speaking was coming from the water itself. Upstream, in the river, somehow using the pipes to carry sound. I can't contaminate the drinking water, I said. Whatever you're putting in, it's affecting the taste. We put nothing in. We only take small amounts. Please allow the flow. Why? What do you need it for? To exist. To continue. We've always taken from this place. Since before your facility. Since before humans. Please allow the flow. I didn't respond. I stood there trying to process what I was hearing. Voices from the river, requesting increased water flow at night, claiming to need it for existence. Please, the voices said again. We mean no harm. We only need small amounts. Please maintain the schedule. I reported everything to my supervisor, the intruder, the unauthorized valve operations, the voices. He listened quietly, then suggested I take some time off. Recommended I see the company's occupational health counselor. You're experiencing stress-related symptoms, he said carefully. Overnight shifts can be challenging. Nobody's blaming you, but you need rest. I'm not imagining this. Check the monitoring data. Check the video recording. He did check. The data showed the flow spikes, but the video showed an empty intake building, valves moving on their own, which to him confirmed equipment malfunction, not supernatural intervention. I was placed on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. The facility went to day shift operation only, with operators checking remotely overnight. Within a week, the complaints started. Not about taste now, about smell. The water smelled wrong, rotten, like decay. Multiple residents called in reports. The health department got involved. My supervisor called me. Whatever you were doing at night, it was preventing something worse. We need you back. I was fighting to keep the valves closed. There's something in the river that wants more water flow. Can you negotiate with it? So I returned. I went back to overnight shifts, back to the intake building at 2 a.m. I stood at the valves and spoke to the pipes. I'll allow increased flow for 30 minutes each night, but only 30 minutes. And you have to stop affecting the water quality. The voices answered immediately, acceptable. Thank you. We will control our presence more carefully. That was 4 months ago. Every night I open the intake valves wider for 30 minutes between 2 and 2:30 a.m. The flow increases, more river water enters the system, and whatever is in that water gets what it needs. The taste complaints stopped. The water quality remains perfect by all tests. Whatever arrangement we have, it's working. I don't know what they are. I've tried to research it, local history, indigenous stories, environmental studies. I found no references to anything living in that river. Nothing that would explain voices and intelligence and the need for increased flow. But they've been there longer than the facility. They said so themselves. Since before humans. They've always taken from this place. And now I facilitate that. I open the valves, I allow the flow, I maintain our agreement. In exchange, the drinking water stays clean. My supervisor doesn't ask questions anymore. The health department is satisfied. The residents have clean water. Everything is working, but I think about it every night when I open those valves. I think about what I'm allowing into the treatment system, what